And from WP Alpha here. I'm back to talk about WP Rocket settings. So WP Rocket is one of two plugins we recommend. WPRocketPlugin.com. The other one we recommend is FlyingPress, flyingpress.net. I talked about those in a different video about WordPress, the best WordPress caching plugin. So check that out if you want to know the details. Broadly speaking, WP Rocket we find to be a more reliable and stable plugin, whereas FlyingPress can squeeze a little bit more performance out of the site, but it might sacrifice reliability for some more complex sites. FlyingPress is better for users who are more technical. I'm going to try and keep this video short-ish, so you can follow along. So I've got WP Rocket here open on our website, actually. That's the plugin we use. And we're on version 3.20.4. And I'm just going to run through the different sections and I'll explain what we're doing here. So a few things. So this is a paid plugin. The single site license is $59 US a year. Pretty cheap in terms of what it does in terms of performance. We don't use the RocketCDN. We use Cloudflare, and you should use Cloudflare too. You should not use two CDNs together. So if you already have Cloudflare, do not get the RocketCDN. When you combine two CDNs, you are slowing things down because one CDN has to send the traffic to the next CDN, which then sends it to the website. So that's a bad idea. So avoid two CDNs, and you'd be better off on the 25 or even the free Cloudflare plan, or the $5 APO, $5 a month APO subscription, or the $25 a month, I think it's business plan, which has image optimization, firewall, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we don't use the CDN. We don't use the Rocket Insights either. Let's talk about this for a minute. This uses GTmetrix for performance monitoring. GTmetrix is a lab or synthetic testing tool. It's lab data, not field data. We care about Core Web Vitals. Core Web Vitals is the name of the game. That is Google's data set on your site speed that it has pulled from visitors hitting your site using a Chrome-based browser. So you can score like this. Our homepage is 76. We have a whole bunch of heavy stuff on there, like we have a very heavy lead form. What we care about is passing Core Web Vitals, and we do on the homepage. That's it. So we don't need a 100 score in a test. We don't need a 100 score in PageSpeed Insights. What we care about is Core Web Vitals. Are users getting a fast user experience or not? So we don't really use this. It's only set up. We're actually setting up to test it. But we have this turned off, and you probably don't need it. So you should be looking at Core Web Vitals. You should be looking at CruxViz with Google, cruxviz.withgoogle.com. And this will give you a full data set of how the site is performing week-to-week updates. So that's what you should be using for monitoring performance, that or Google Search Console. Enough about that. Let's move on to the next bit. CSS and JavaScript. So I talked about in the best WordPress plugin videos, you should not use minify, CSS, or JavaScript. What minify does, it strips out line breaks, spaces, comments from these files to make them a tiny bit smaller, but it really does nothing in the practical real world. Your web server already has compression. It has gzip compression and it has Brotli compression, which are both very good, and they'll squeeze the size of the file significantly more than minify ever could. The problem with minify is that what it's doing is renaming the JavaScript files and renaming the CSS files. Now, what happens is that means the browser cannot cache them. So every time you clear the cache here, WP Rocket clear cache, or you update a page, the file name of the CSS files or file names of the CSS files and JavaScript files change, which means that anything in a cache, so Cloudflare cache or the visitor's browser cache, is now invalid. It's not a file that works anymore. So it actually slows down the site for repeat visitors. It can also break the site layout in some cases, depending on what sort of caching setup you have, particularly if you're using Cloudflare's edge caching. So don't use it. It doesn't do anything. It actually makes performance worse overall. So avoid using these minify settings. Avoid using this combined JavaScript. This is the same thing, and you have to have the minify on to do this. Looks like I can't even turn it on anyway. Oh, because I haven't saved the settings. This does the same thing. It takes all the JavaScript files and puts them into one. It gives it a unique file name, and every time you clear the cache, it renames that file. So again, that's bad for caching. It's bad for repeat visitors. JavaScript will actually go faster if the files are individually in most cases, if they're individual files and not combined files. This combining files is a technique from 10 plus years ago, before the HTTP 2 protocol was around. And I won't get into that too specifically, but these settings, minify CSS, minify JavaScript, combine JavaScript, will slow things down, and we will immediately turn them off when we see client sites with them. So don't use them. Optimize CSS delivery. Now we're using GeneratePress theme. We're also using some other plugins for optimization. So we don't want to optimize CSS delivery. In this case, the CSS is very good in GeneratePress theme as is. You don't ever want to duplicate optimization. So we're using GeneratePress to deal with the CSS. We are not dealing with it here in the plugin, because if you have multiple things doing the same speed optimization, they're overlapping and can cause conflicts or problems. So we're avoiding this. Depending on what theme you have, you may want to turn this on or off. So just be mindful with this setting. You don't necessarily want to use it if you're on a fast, modern theme. So we have GeneratePress, so we don't use it. These two here you want to use. So loading JavaScript deferred. So basically what this does, it stops the JavaScript firing until the page has loaded, essentially. So for most sites, this works fine. But if you have particular things here that are breaking or have problems, you want to have exclusions for those JavaScript files. So our website relies heavily on jQuery. So we've excluded jQuery and some of these other bits and pieces from this rule because it was breaking things. So you need to be mindful with this. When JavaScript is too heavily optimized, things like menus will break or accordions will break. Things will break in strange ways that might not necessarily be noticeable. One easy way to figure out if things are breaking is to open the developer console. So if you open a browser, right-click, go to inspect, and open this console, if you see a whole bunch of red stuff in here, something has gone wrong with the JavaScript optimization. And it will usually give you the file name. You can see here it's giving you a bunch of file names. So usually by giving you the file name, you can add an exclusion into this list. If you have a really complex site, like a WooCommerce site, or a site with a lot of JavaScript, that could be a problem. So just keep that in mind. But this is a bit more technical and can break things. So just keep that in mind. This one here is even more risky, delaying the JavaScript execution. So what this does, this stops the JavaScript on the site firing until the user interacts with the site. So that can make the site look really, really good in a speed test because half the site isn't even loading when you initially load. The problem with that is it breaks the site render. So in some cases, like I said, half the site doesn't even load without this JavaScript. It doesn't render. So that's a problem because we look great in a speed test, and it's a really easy hack to get a 100 score on Google PageSpeed Insights, which a lot of companies that are guaranteeing you a 100 score, that's what they're doing. They're basically not loading the entire website initially. It's a great hack to get that 100 score, but in real life, it will probably negatively impact the Core Web Vitals metrics. It also might break your analytics tracking too, because that code is firing late. So we've actually turned it off on our site. We did have it on for a while, but we have a number of tools like CallRail, Facebook Pixel, things like that. It was breaking, so we actually stopped using it. That's because our site's a little bit more complex in terms of the tracking. If you want to use this, use it with caution. What we'd say is turn it on, use the safe mode, and exclude everything from it. So then there's just a handful of third-party scripts that are being excluded. So even in our case, we don't want Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager to be paused because it breaks tracking. So it will make the site look better in a speed test with this stuff turned fully on, everything delayed. But yeah, we might break things. It might break the tracking. It might break the render. It might break things in strange ways. And it's also an SEO problem because if Google comes to the site and only half the site's loaded, then when it indexes it, it only sees half a site. You may actually end up with penalties because the site's not rendering properly. So use this one with caution. Default using everything there will make the site faster, but it might also break it. And I talked about in the last video, the WordPress caching plugins video, that our priority is always reliability over speed. So there's no point sacrificing reliability for a small speed gain if the site's not working for half the people visiting it. Media stuff. So lazy loading. So we use a different plugin for lazy loading. We use Perf Matters for lazy loading. You see here we have it. The Perf Matters lazy loading is a bit better than WP Rocket. And I've talked again about you don't want to overlap the optimization. So we have that optimization being done in Perf Matters. If you don't have any lazy loading, then you can enable that. So this lazy loading basically doesn't load the images until you scroll down to that part of the page. You can also turn it on for YouTube videos and iframes and things like that. Just be careful if your theme, sometimes Elementor and some of the bigger page builders have a form of lazy loading built in. So you don't want to have conflicts there. So just keep that in mind. So just be careful with that. And then these exclusions we have here, you want to exclude anything that's above the fold, images above the fold from lazy loading, like logos, and we had excluded these icons. We actually moved all that to Perf Matters because Perf Matters does this automatically. So it automatically excludes things from lazy loading that are above the fold. So we actually don't want to add any delays, anything that's above the fold. So in this viewable area, we don't want to delay the loading because it actually makes things slower. So that's why those are exclusions there, but we're actually not using this stuff anyway because we don't have the image lazy loading on. This one here, adding image dimensions, this can help fix layout shift, so we have it on by default. And then these with the preload fonts and self-host Google fonts, we're using a different plugin for these, but these probably should be turned on by default for you if you don't have any other optimization plugins. This self-host Google fonts, we'd actually use the fonts optimization in Cloudflare instead. It's a better optimization than this one. So that's those settings. Preload. So this is an important one. So there's two kind of preloads here. One is where the plugins, the WP Rocket, and all caching plugins have this. They'll go through the sitemap and they'll automatically build the pages. So we talked about in the last video that what a caching plugin does, it builds all the pages in advance before the user gets to the site. So it builds the pages, saves them on the server, so they're ready to load when the user hits the site. So that's what caching is. That is a cache, page cache. So those pages, ideally you want them built in advance, not when the first user hits them. So that's what preloading is. So you want that on by default. You might want to exclude pages here if you don't want them pre-built, cart, checkout pages, anything that's a dynamic page, you might want to exclude. WP Rocket will pull those pages from the sitemap. So if there's something in the sitemap that you want to, if you want to exclude from caching, then that would be where it goes. Link preloading, this is something called just-in-time preloading. And this site here explains what it does perfectly. Instant.page, this one here. So basically there is a delay between hovering over something and clicking on it. So you can see here, that was nearly a 1 second delay. So in that delay, you can start to load the page. So what just-in-time preloading does, or what WP Rocket is calling link preloading, is turning on this feature where if I hover over this, the browser has already started to load it before I click on it. So you can see that 3 second delay. So in that 3 seconds, the page can actually load. So that's what that is. We actually use this plugin Flying Pages. It's from the same guys as Flying Press, which does this just-in-time preloading, but it also loads all the links in this area. It just runs through and starts loading them in the background when I hit this page. So it's a more advanced version of this, but if you just have WP Rocket, turn this on. But we've got it off because we're doing that again in another plugin. Advanced rules, this is where you can exclude things from caching. So if there's pages you don't want to cache, if there's cookies you don't want to cache, this is more of an advanced section. Our cache time is set for 7 days. That's a good balance between rebuilding the pages and not. If you have a bigger site, you might want to set this higher or lower depending on how often pages are changing. But 7 days is good for us. We would never set it to unlimited. The reason being, if something goes wrong with the cache, that page will be broken forever until the full page cache is cleared. So by 7 days, it's clearing out every 7 days. So even if there was a page with an issue with a layout or something like that, or bad cache data, every 7 days it's being flushed out. So this one is advanced. So you probably, in the scope of this video, it's probably not worth getting into. Database stuff, we generally wouldn't touch any of this stuff. We would schedule an automatic cleanup maybe for a WooCommerce site that has a lot of transients and stuff, but you can use this as a one-shot kind of cleanup. If you have a really old WooCommerce site, you might have 1 million transients, and cleaning that will speed up the database. But generally, we don't touch this. We don't care about revisions in the database. We don't care about a lot of this stuff. So for us, it's not a problem. If you're running out of storage space, 1,000 revisions is a lot. You might want to clear those out. So that one is really, I wouldn't do it by default. It would be, okay, we need to do a cleanup here. Like spam comments, okay, maybe clean those out. But for us, we don't need to do any of this stuff because it's not a dynamic site like, say, a WooCommerce site. CDN we talked about. We don't use WP Rockets CDN. Cloudflare is better, so we ignore that completely. There is a Cloudflare add-on here somewhere. There we go. So Cloudflare add-on, but we're using the Cloudflare plugin directly instead of this. If you're not using the Cloudflare plugin, then enable this and add the API key. The other thing in the add-on section is the user cache. So this cache is logged in users. So if you have a WooCommerce site or LMS or something where users are logging in, you want to turn that on. We don't have that, so we don't have it turned on. But that will cache logged in user sessions. If you have a WooCommerce site, you want to turn that one on, probably. Heartbeat, we never use the heartbeat. Heartbeat is a nonsense optimization. I don't know why it still has this feature. I don't know why people talk about it online. We've optimized 5,000 sites, well, more than 5,000 sites, and we'd never had an issue about heartbeat. So this is just kind of a nonsense optimization, kind of similar to minify. It's just there for legacy reasons. So we would never use this. And in some cases, this will break the back end. So again, reliability over speed. Image optimization, we don't use Imagify. We use EWW Optimizer. You can see it there. One of the reasons why we use that is because it can use the hosting itself to do the image compression, so it's much faster. So it means you can also use it for free. Imagify, it's decent. It's like all optimization plugins. They all use the same compression algorithms, so it just depends what you like using. Before we used EWWW, we used ShortPixel. We like that as well. They're all much the same. There's no real difference because they all use the same underlying algorithms for compression. So we like EWW because it works faster and it's cheaper because it can use hosting performance instead of the API. So that's the only reason why we have it. Tools, we don't use any of this stuff. We rarely use this unless it's a special reason. So we rarely have to roll back versions. So there's really nothing to do there. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff there about, help and things like that. But that's really the WP Rocket settings we use. It's pretty simple. Like I said, the extra plugins we use are Perf Matters. We use a Cloudflare plugin, which is in this list. There it is there. And Flying Pages. We also use this Flying Scripts plugin for some delaying JavaScript stuff, only a little bit though. And then EWW Optimizer there for images. So that's it. If you have any questions, post in the comments below. Otherwise, if you need help with your site speed, check out our website, wpspeedfix.com. You can request a free site audit there, see how we can help. There's also some free tools here, that free SEO audit, free Core Web Vitals report, free WordPress speed test. They all take 60 to 90 seconds, completely free, no opt-in required. So I'll leave you to it. Again, if you have any questions, post in the comments below and we'll come back to you. Cheers.